Merhaba, bugünkü özel röportajımıza hoş geldiniz. Bugünkü konumuz politikaları ve para kurullarını konuşacağız. Türkiye'nin para kuruluna katılmama ihtimali varsa avantajlarını ve dezavantajlarını Steve Hanke'le beraber değerlendireceğiz. Kendisi Johns Hopkins Üniversitesi'nde profesör olarak görevine devam ediyor. Aynı zamanda Beyaz Saray'da Ronald Reagan'ın ABD başkanlığı döneminde ekonomi danışmanı olarak görev almıştı. Kendisinin 2001 yılında yayınlanan gelişmekte olan ülkeler için para kurulu el kitabı eseri de geçen yıl Türkçe yayınlandı. Şimdi kendisine döneceğiz.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, Mr.
Professor.
Professor, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Good to be with you, Saida.
Thank you very much for joining us today, and it's a big honor to see you at Ekotürk TV. I would like to start asking, what is the board and what is the possibility that Turkey can join the currency board in the future?
Well, first of all, I should mention what a currency board actually is. Now, it's interesting because your neighbor, Bulgaria, I was President Stoyanov's advisor in the hyperinflation they had in 1997 in Bulgaria. And this was a huge hyperinflation. The maximum monthly inflation rate was in February of 1997. It was 242% month. In 1 month, 242%. So what to do? I recommended that Bulgaria install a currency board, and a currency board in effect made the lev, that's the local currency in Bulgaria, a clone at that time of the Deutschmark, which was the anchor currency we used. Now, how do you do this? It's very simple. You fix the exchange rate between the local currency, in Bulgaria it was a lev, and an anchor currency. At the time it was a Deutschmark. And you allow the local currency and the anchor currency to trade freely without any restrictions at all. And you require that the local currency be backed 100% with anchor currency reserves. So at the time, when we put in the currency board in 1997 in Bulgaria, the lev was backed 100% with Deutschmark reserves. It traded at a fixed exchange rate, Deutschmark, freely. And that meant if you didn't like your lev, you could exchange it at the fixed exchange rate for the Deutschmark. Lev was just as good as a Deutschmark, 100%. So that's why I say the local currency becomes a clone of whatever the anchor is in a currency board system. There have been over 70 currency boards historically, and none of them have ever failed because they can't fail. You have to have 100% reserves backing the local currency. So they're absolutely foolproof. The hyperinflation in Bulgaria, what happened? It collapsed. In a day, the hyperinflation was gone. And the next thing that happened, of course, capital flowing into Bulgaria because the interest rates in lev were higher than they were in Germany in the Deutschmark. So there was a huge arbitrage trade, and capital started flowing in to Bulgaria. Demand for the lev went up. People were exchanging their Deutschmarks to get lev. And everything has worked perfectly. And they still have the currency board. It works perfectly. Now, of course, the anchor is the euro because the Deutschmark no longer exists. So the Bulgarian lev is a clone of the euro. It's exactly the same thing as the euro.
So if Turkey joins the currency board, what will be the exchange rate then?
Well, the exchange rate, here's the way we did it in which is the right way to do it. In Turkey, this would be really like manna from heaven. This would really be a fantastic thing for Turkey if they had a currency board, because the one thing that's always a problem in Turkey is and how do you fix it with a currency board? You ask, well, what would the exchange rate be? Here's the way you do that. I don't know what the exchange would be. What I would do, would require, as we did in Bulgaria, the central bank would freeze the money supply for 30 days. First of all, Erdogan would announce that they were going to install a currency board system in Turkey. The central bank would say, we're freezing the Turkish money supply for 1 month, and we will let the Turkish lira float freely for 1 month. And at the end of the month, you would see what the exchange was. You would then compare that to calculations you'd made and so forth to see if it was a reasonable exchange rate, and then you would fix it. You would fix the exchange rate. Now in Turkey, what I think the ideal anchor would be gold. Turks like gold. Gold, in fact, is the most stable international currency there is, and it has no political connotations, because if you had a euro anchor, that would create problems for it has political implications. The dollar is the world's currency, but that also has political issues associated. Both the euro and the dollar are issued by sovereigns, and to be neutral, if you had gold, it's not issued by a sovereign, it's neutral. So it would be ideal from the political point of view in Turkey, but even more so, all you have to do is go to the Grand Bazaar any day. There's gold all over the place. The
Yeah.
Turks love gold, and therefore, by doing a gold-backed currency board, you would let the lira float for 30 days against the price of gold, and then you would make a determination about the exchange rate between the lira and the gold, and you would back the new lira with gold 100%, and the whole thing would be fixed forever. Now, in addition to that, this would put Turkey in a huge leadership position, because they would effectively go back on the gold standard. All the Middle East, Lebanon now. Lebanon is in a complete crisis right now with the Lebanese pound. It's even worse than the and Lebanon would go for it. Iran would go for it. Probably Russia would go for it. You would have all of North Africa going for it. So Turkey would be the example. They would solve all their problems with regard to currency and finances overnight. Inflation, by the way, in Turkey, it's gone up a lot since July. And my calculation, the most accurate one, inflation now in Turkey is about double the official rate. My measure has inflation at about 20% per year in Turkey. So the inflation's coming back. Inflation's going to be a big problem in Turkey.
Okay. Yes, it's a big problem in Turkey, the inflation. But let me ask the question: that if Turkey joins the currency board, how it will attract the foreign investments then?
Foreign investments would skyrocket in Turkey. The money would flow in immediately to Turkey, because you would have a stable currency that was as good, literally as good as gold. So the money would come flowing in exactly like it did in Bulgaria, by the way. Bulgaria was a disaster in 1997. They hadn't even removed themselves really from the old communist economic regime in 1997. But with the currency board, everything changed overnight. And the key thing with these currency boards, you see, the central bank can no longer finance government deficits and government spending. So you have you put the gun in a straitjacket and you discipline the fiscal situation. And that's what's happened in Bulgaria. You look at the fiscal deficits in Bulgaria, they're tiny. No matter what government, you have a right-wing government, you have a left-wing government, you have a middle government, all of them are disciplined. They run very small fiscal deficits. And if you look at the debt to GDP ratio in Bulgaria, It's one of the lowest ones in Europe. It's either the lowest or the second lowest one. So discipline, that's what's lacking in Turkey. There is no discipline. No one wants to invest in a country where you have a great deal of uncertainty and lack of discipline with the fiscal affairs of the country. And the currency board would give you discipline immediately.
Okay. Um, I mean, there are 14 countries, as long as I know, that join to the currency board, and there are still many countries that do not want to join. And the reason behind this, that they don't want to be indexed to dollar. And you, like a couple of minutes ago, you said that maybe that can be fixed with gold in Turkey. But let me tell you this, that Turkish energy power installation is about to 90,000 megawatt, and the normal standards in a country in order to live energy power installation should be 2 kilowatt per person. So if we say that we can fix this currency rate to the energy power installation, do you think it can work, and how this transition to the new world economy order can be possible? Is it possible with the system after coronavirus?
Well, what you're suggesting is that instead of anchor the lira to electricity, so you'd have an electricity standard, it wouldn't work. Anything like this, it wouldn't work in Turkey. You have to use the standard plain vanilla thing, and the world currency is the U.S. dollar. Period. That is the only international currency in the world. The problem is in Turkey and many other countries, it has political implications and connotations that you and the politicians politically, it's not practical in some countries like Turkey to say, oh, we're going to have our currency loan of the U.S. dollar. It's going to be just like the U.S. dollar. So that and the same with the euro. They don't want the local currency to be a clone of the euro. So because those two currencies are fiat currencies issued by sovereigns, and they have all kinds of political implications. Gold is not issued by a sovereign, and it's more stable than all these fiat. Its purchasing power is much more stable. It's the best possible anchor from a stability point of view, but also from a political point of view, because it is not issued by a sovereign. It has no political implications. So gold is the way to go. You go on the gold standard and don't fool around. I can think people have proposed in places like Finland, for example, to go on a wood standard. They have a lot of trees there. So you would have a wood standard, you see, and
Yeah.
have the money. And you've suggested, well, you go on an electric standard or something. It would be a very unsatisfactory, unstable scheme. Gold is the way to go, and if you did a survey in Turkey, I'm positive you would have at least 80% of the Turks would vote for if you had a referendum and you said, do we want lira to be a clone of the dollar, or do we want a clone of the euro, or do we want it a clone of gold? I'm certain 80% of the Turks would say gold.
Okay, that's true. Yes. Okay, let's skip to Turkish economy. According to the sources, that Turkish economy grew by 6% in the last quarter of 2019, and it was able to close the year with 0.9% growth. So, can a government achieve 5% growth targeted for 2020?
Well, no. The answer, and sure, no. It's a simple answer. And looks like, and it's not going to be plus 5%, it's probably going to be minus 5%, or even minus more than 5%.
Okay, I mean, according to the IMF,
Global
that The world shrink by 3% and Fitch ratings by 3.9% in 2020. And global growth for 2020 is negative, but some analysts say that the growth for 2021 will be positive. I mean, is this a realistic numbers? Is it possible like that these numbers can achieve for 2021?
I think my own view about the post coronavirus world will be that we will not have this sharp V-shaped recovery because these lockdowns have done so much damage to the economy, and it's the kind of damage that no one really can assess very clearly right now. So I think there'll be an uneven recovery with a lot of uncertainties, and it will be less satisfactory than most of the consensus projections. I think the consensus projections are too optimistic. There are too many uncertainties, too many unknowns. We just don't know. But my intuition is that there's been almost catastrophic damage done to the international economy, and they talk about it in terms of supply chains, but it's businesses. All kinds of businesses have been very damaged.
The economic crisis is big. Like after coronavirus, I don't know how it will be shaped, but I think it will take quite a lot of time to recover. But the central banks are becoming very vital for the economies. And what's your suggestion for to overcome the crisis? And do you think the printing money is the solution?
Well, there are two aspects to this. One is a short-term problem and the short-term disruptions that we've had, and on the 10th of April, I wrote an article with John Greenwood, who's a chief economist at Invesco, in the Wall Street Journal, and we suggested and recommended that the Federal Reserve inject a massive amount of liquidity into the market, and that they basically would take anyone who wanted credit and had good collateral, the Fed should extend credit to them. And on the 12th, 2 days after our article, that's exactly what the Federal Reserve did, and I think they did the right thing. But it's a short-term liquidity injection to keep the markets from completely collapsing, to keep things liquid, basically, and keep things working in the short term. You mentioned something, you said printing money. Now, printing money is not a short term, that's a long term aspect. And that is where the danger comes. If they keep doing this and they would finance the government expenditures with the central bank printing money, as you say, then we have a problem, because then we're going to have a lot more inflation. And if we get into the printing money option, which is a longer term thing, then you're starting to live in a world that all the Turks live in all the time, because the central bank's always printing money in Turkey. And it would be unsatisfactory, because the dollar is the international currency. If the Federal Reserve started printing money, you can imagine what would happen to the international currency. It would get weak. It would become unsound. It would become unreliable, and people would start going to other options. And of course the U.S. dollar would lose its dominance if that was the case. So short term, yes, but you must put liquidity in. You must act as a lender of last resort as a central bank. That's just what the Federal Reserve did. Very good job so far. Long term, printing money implies financing the government. No, that's a bad idea.
Especially in the coronavirus time, so many people lost their job, and there are so many unemployed people in the world, and especially in USA, the number is high. What's your opinion about this?
Well, if look, the government told people they couldn't go to work. It's illegal to go to work in a lot of places. So it's a complete catastrophe. The
Yeah.
lockdown means that the government orders you to stay at home. You can't work. You can't go to a restaurant. You can't do almost anything. So the short solution for that, if the government orders you to stay at home and not work, then the government should pay you, because they've basically made you a prisoner in your own home, and it's the law to work, so they have to pay you. They have to compensate you. Same. Let's say the government, let's say you're building a new, enlarging the phosphorus, or building a new canal, or whatever the project is in Turkey. If the government has to take private property to do that, what does the government have to do? It has to pay the owner of the property for what the government's taken from them. Well, in this case, taken the worker's livelihood because it's illegal to work, and so the government has to pay. That's the short-term solution, but this is not a real solution. The only solution is to do a lot of testing, do a lot of tracing, and safely open the economy. I mean, you've got to reopen the economy. And the longer the lockdown stays in place, the more catastrophic the damage is going to be to the economy.
Okay, Professor, thank you very much for your participation. It's a really good and honoring to have you here, and hope to speak to you in the future. And I wish you a safe life and
That's
speak.
great. I hope to see you in Istanbul soon. We see
Hopefully.
the virus. Actually, Mrs. Hanke and I were supposed to be in Istanbul in March. The trip was canceled because of the virus. So
Yeah.
that's one negative aspect of the virus. We weren't in Istanbul enjoying our Turkish friends and Turkish food.
Yeah, when I come to there, I will bring you good Turkish baklava. Let's say that.
Okay, excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor.